Artlist.io. Music licensing reimagined.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. This is our PM actual news. But first and foremost, please let me know if you can hear me, because this morning we had all sorts of issues. Lisa, bonsoir, good evening. Can you tell me if you can hear me, please? Hey, Sarah. Hello. Hello. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, Sierra. Good evening. Yes, you can hear me? Good. Goodness gracious. This morning we had all sorts of drama without the possibility to hear me. So I'm very happy you can hear me. Hi, Rosie Marie. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, Sarah. Good evening, Sierra. Sierra, good evening, Lisa. Hello. Ladies in the house. Very happy. And gentlemen, too. Very welcome. Today we're going to discuss our actual news. I already sent out your newsletter with all the deep dives that I discussed in the morning and also now. So please go ahead and read it. There's so much information, not just political situation, but also a lot of the developments in business as well, because this sort of everything is interconnected. And so this is, interesting to read. And I hope that you take the time to read it. Now, if you're wondering what am I talking about, this is the newsletter, honest.substack.com. So you're very much invited to subscribe, whether you support or it's free, you decide. And I'm very grateful for you. And and also, I think Sarah started this trend this morning. Please like this video. I always forget to tell you, but please like it so algorithm can share it with our like-minded people. Okay? All right. Thank you for being here. Now, to the news. Tomorrow, President Biden and First Lady Dr. Biden will host the first ever White House conference on women's health research. Remember when Jill Biden a couple of years ago said, listen, I'm going to the doctor and, anything that I'm complaining about is not being taken seriously enough. Right? It says, the doctors say, well, you're overreacting. Maybe calm yourself down, or maybe, and then diving into the topic, she realized that actually entire research in health industry is based on man. And so she convinced, and it was an easy, task to convince President Biden to invest in women's health research. And so tomorrow will be the very first conference. And so the conference organized in collaboration with the White House Initiative on Women's Health Research. That's what they started. And the Milken Institute will bring together business and philanthropic leaders, academic researchers, women's health advocates, investors, and federal agency representatives to showcase the President and First Lady's historic leadership to advance women's health research and discuss how to continue making progress on improving women's health. And so this will be around 11:30 a.m. Eastern at the White House. I was invited to cover it, but unfortunately in New York, I'm covering something at 12 p.m. tomorrow, which is very interesting, and I'll tell you all about it tomorrow. So in other news, and since we have ladies here, who is liked? Oh, Sierra, thank you. It is a problem, yeah, about the health research, absolutely. And now with HHS being, hopefully not, but possibly run by RFK Jr., who knows where we're going to end up there. So then, in big news today, U.S. announced $20 billion disbursement to Ukraine as part of G7 ERA loans initiative. So the U.S. Department of Treasury has announced the release of $20 billion for Ukraine as part of the G7's $50 billion extraordinary revenue acceleration. That's what the ERA stands for, those loans initiative. And I did cover that in person. This was during the UN week in New York, where Ukraine's President Zelensky and other G7 leaders, including, of course, President Biden, we were all in one room. And then they announced that the $50 billion will be dispersed or will be released before the end of the year to help Ukraine. This is not for defense of Ukraine, but this is for rebuilding Ukraine. So pretty much Russian assets are accumulating interest, right? And so the EU, together with US, accounted for $50 billion in those profits, and they're using the Russian profits to pay off the damage that Russia has caused to Ukraine. Of course, human life, of course, the suffering, of course, the torture. That cannot be compensated. But at least, the hospitals and everything that they have damaged, right? And so the funds derived from windfall proceeds of immobilized Russian assets will support Ukraine's emergency services, hospitals, and Ukraine's emergency services, hospitals, and critical infrastructure amidst the ongoing war. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen underscored the significance of the initiative, stating it ensures Russia bears the economic costs of its aggression, rather than taxpayers in coalition countries. And how important is that, right? Because if Trump administration were to come in and dismantle all of this, that means what? That means we, the taxpayers, will be responsible for helping other countries, and in this case, Ukraine. So why not take the aggressors' profits and make them compensate for aggressors' damage that they caused? So very sort of straightforward initiative. But then again, Trump administration doesn't like it because, again, Putin doesn't like it, right? And his friends. Now, these funds will be transferred via the World Bank's Fortis Ukraine Financial Intermediary Fund for direct allocation. So again, it's not going to Ukraine. It's not a blank check that is being written to Zelensky, so he can buy houses or whatever is conspiracy theorists are telling. This is controlled by international community. So Ukraine's Financial Intermediary Fund, they receive the funds, they see what is needed where, and they allocate the funds for whatever projects are there and whatever projects are being approved. Okay? So I know my voice is a little funky, so I have a mic coming in on Thursday because it's I know you can't hear me much, but we'll get there in a second. So what did Russia do today, right? And why those funds are important. For instance, today, Russia bombed a hospital in Zaporizhia region with ballistic missiles. So take a look what this looks like, and then think about what this $50 billion will exactly go to. I think this video was silent. I got scared for a second. So anyway, they recorded this, of course, without sounds, probably not to reveal voices or whatever. But such a huge damage. And I will not show you the videos how they were dragging patients who were undergoing care, who suffered from this attack, and how it looks like, and somebody's missing a limb and stuff. It's really heartbreaking, and it is continuing. Just because we're talking about Syria right now, right? Or we talk about Israel or Middle East altogether, and we don't talk as much about Ukraine, it doesn't mean it stopped from happening. It does still happen. Every single day, they torture people. But then, back to Syria. No, without that. No, we go back to Syria, sorry. So key discussions in Syria, Ukraine, and regional stability held by national security advisors. So White House, national security advisors, the Biden administration, together with folks from their equivalent from France, Germany, Italy, and United Kingdom, they got together and they discussed the following. Syria, the group emphasized supporting the aspirations of Syrian people during the Assad regime's collapse and managing the risks of ongoing transition. Then they talked about regional ceasefires, efforts to reinforce the ceasefire in Lebanon and secure a ceasefire and hostage deal in Gaza. Then they talked about Ukraine. Our national security advisor, Deputy Feiner, highlighted the Biden-Harris administration's commitment to bolstering Ukraine's position heading into 2025 and increasing pressure on Russia for its aggression. And then they talked about the Democratic backsliding in Georgia. So concerns were raised about recent violence against protesters and Democratic erosion, including last month's elections. So why is it important? It is important for diplomacy on all levels, right? Not just presidents or Secretary of State, but also national security advisors, because those are the people that will take the main idea, let's say, ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon on the northern border of Israel. And then they take this idea, break it down into tangible actions and actual literal steps that every single party has to undertake. And it is important that the G7 leaders, essentially, or national security advisors, are getting together to make sure that everything works in line with each other. So for this reason, it's important that this meeting did happen. Now, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan tonight met with hostage families. With the families of hostages that are currently being held in Gaza. And he will travel to Israel tomorrow, which just underlines the notion that the talks with Hamas about the ceasefire between Israel and Gaza have restarted, because Hamas is lacking any power, but also any aid. Same as Assad was begging for Russia to help, for Iran to help, and none of them could help, right? And so Hezbollah now agreed to the ceasefire in Lebanon, right, with the Israelis, and Hamas is not getting any support. So for them to survive, they need to freeze the conflict at least, which reminds you on home, on Putin and Ukraine. So then this was in the gaggle today. It was John Kirby, with the National Security Advisor, National Security Council spokesperson. And so there was a Newsmax guy named James Rosen who asked the last question. And he sort of made John Kirby almost lose his control, because he started saying, how dare President Biden declare that it is his success that Assad regime fell. It's only Netanyahu's success, because Biden was withholding at least one transfer of military aid and weapons to Israel, and only Benjamin Netanyahu did everything. And how dare Biden to claim that he did something? He did nothing. And then John Kirby started, it's like, I don't have time to explain it to you. Let's meet one-on-one and talk it out. But I really, like, how dare you, and all that kind of stuff. So this was an interesting an interesting exchange. And also Kirby pointed out that President Biden was in fact the first president to use aircrafts, right, and defend Israel twice. And Israel was bombed lately this year twice. U.S. Air Force defended it together with allies, together with UK, together with France, and so for the first time, right? So how dare you? Well, should be mirrored and say, how dare you? Now, talking about MAGA updates, since we're going from Newsmax to MAGA updates. Well, this photo went viral today, showing that apparently Don Jr. has split from his fiancée, Kimberly, and moved on with this new love. She's a socialite, Bettina Anderson. And, people start discussing this and this and this. And then at night, we got this announcement from his father, who says, today, I'm very pleased to announce the appointment of Kimberly as the United States ambassador to Greece. For many years, Kimberly has been a close friend and ally. So my question is, it's like the chicken and the egg. What was first? What was first? Was she dumped and this is her payout? Was she there hoping to get a position? She didn't get a position. Then she dumped him. I don't know. Anyway, but this is sort of the update from the MAGA world. Is that why they're slipping? See? Yeah. Exactly. Propaganda. Propaganda. Yes, I agree. Um, Lisa is just laughing. Okay. Then talking about propaganda, the propagandist, yeah, to keep her mouth shut. Yes, Sarah, exactly, right? So, probably she signed a couple of FDAs or NDAs. So anyway, it's been a long day. I've been on Zoom from 8:30 in the morning with only interruption to come here live through like 8:30 p.m. and with everybody screaming and and writing newsletters. So if I say something that makes little sense, forgive me. Now continuing with MAGA and propaganda. Viktor Orban, the leader of Hungary, the dark stain on Europe and European Union, who vetoes aid for Ukraine, who is very MAGA, who is very this and that. Now, um, he traveled to his mothership and he met with Trump and Mar-a-Lago today. Look at his face. He's so happy. He's so happy. Look, he even wore the tie and everything. Probably the Trump tie. And then he met with his other hero. Check it out. And Musk is like, he's carrying this kid like a human shield. I don't know what we're doing here, but very interesting. And Orban is just excited, giggly and excited. And, somebody commented on my post saying, does Orban know how, no, how does Musk know how corrupt Orban is? And I'm like, did you sleep the next the past year or a few months at least? Does Orban know how corrupt Musk is, right? And I mean, here are the facts. This is the current cabinet nominees, and you see here, right, the poorest, the brokest, the most broke guy here has only $500 million. 200 million, sorry, David Sachs. Really? David Sachs is only 200 million? Wonderful. 100 million. Oz, Dr. Oz. Okay, so television doesn't pay as well. But so those are the poorest guys. And then, goes up to allegedly Trump's 5.4 billion, but who knows what's true. Talking about, corruption or whatever. So that's the video that I wanted to show, either put it together to Russia or actually to the MAGA world. And I decided to put it next to MAGA World. So there is a very, appropriate. In Russia, there's currently an installation about illusion. And so folks who go to check out that installation, so art, they put it all over internet. And so I wanted to show you those pictures of illusion, which really reminds me on our election season, on the Russian, situation with war in Ukraine and whatever. So kudos to those artists. So take a look. So you thought it was a bird, but there's Donald Duck and Barbie, and so for that reason, you thought you were voting for X, but there's Donald Duck and Barbie and everybody. So it's really fits like a glove to this situation. I don't know, but anyway, they do business together. The mothership. Thank you, Rosie Marie. Thank you. I'm happy I made you guys laugh. This is, weird day. I'm trying to make myself laugh at this point. Okay, so good news. Lithuania provides critical NCO training to Ukrainian army squad leaders, meaning Lithuanian army is playing a key role in supporting Ukraine's defense efforts by training the next generation of Ukrainian army non-commissioned officers. Those are the NCOs. The NCOs serve as crucial middle management in militaries, enabling quick, independent decision-making in the response to dynamic situations. Lithuanian trainers recently led an 8-week course for Ukrainian squad leaders, focusing on fundamental leadership skills. Additionally, Lithuania has provided training to Ukrainian mechanics on maintaining vital equipment, including the M113 armored personnel carrier and self-propelled howitzers. This support is vital for enhancing Ukraine's tactical agility and operational effectiveness. So this was reported by NATO. And by the way, I'm so happy that I get briefings and I ask questions and they reply right away when it comes to NATO, when it comes to European Union, because this is at least some, feeling of facts coming from administrations, right? Because come January, it will be very difficult to take something at price value. Also, I wanted to remind you. So there is a video, and I wrote about it on Blue Sky. There is a video of some guest, random. He calls himself a reporter. I've never seen this guy. And so this guy was interviewed by Lex Friedman. Lex Friedman, friend of Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, and whatnot. He's a registered Russian spy. It's on the Russian website. It's a fake name and everything. So he blocked me when I pointed this out. And so he interviewed this reporter guy who essentially completely lied about the proceedings in the briefing room at the White House. Well, his main notion was that we have to dismantle the White House Correspondents Association. Now, if you know me, I'm not a big fan of the association. I'm not a big fan of, nor I'm a part of it, because if I were a part of it, they would silence me, right? Because yes, they create one notion and everybody sort of beats to the drum. But now, what he lied about, because if you see that video, please don't share it. So he lied about the fact as to why AP, Associated Press, is asking the first question. Yes, this is a tradition because AP historically did create the White House Correspondents Association. This association does assign the seats. Yes, the first row is for television. He said, because they want to stand up and say, here I am at the White House. Dude, reporters do it outside. That's why you see the White House in the background. Or if it's an event, you do it inside. I've done it. Others have done it. You don't do it in the press briefing. Have you ever seen somebody stand up in the press briefing and say, hey, I'm at the White House. Here's a speaker. Smile. Like, what are you talking about? Then he claimed that AP is also the one to close the briefing. So Associated Press can get up and say, okay, meeting is over, and everybody runs away. That's just not true. It never happened. Also, he said that, if you're not part of the association, you cannot cover the briefings. You cannot ask questions. I covered the briefings. I can enter the White House, at least, non-Trump administration. So, it's such bullshit. And because people don't know, they're like, oh my God, we didn't know that. His main notion is that we have to dismantle it and put all the MAGA podcasters in the first rows. And I'm sure there's enough podcasters that are MAGA to fill the entire room. And the problem here is that this will create a permanent solution, right? So even when Trump administration is gone, these folks will stay there because they will put it into this type of law, that association that they will sort of create, right? So for that reason, let's be careful what we share. And always, Google is free. So if this is of your interest, if this sort of touched upon your interest, Google it, right? Is this true what this person is saying? Okay. Today, Secretary of State Blinken, issued a whole statement on the situation in Syria, and he called it, "The Syrian people will decide the future of Syria." Quote, "The United States reaffirms its full support for Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political transition. This transition process should lead to credible, inclusive, and non-sectarian governance that meets international standards of transparency and accountability, consistent with the principles of United Nations Security Council Resolution 2254. The transition process and new government must also uphold clear commitments to fully respect the rights of minorities, facilitate facilitate the flow of humanitarian assistance to all in need, prevent Syria from being used as a base for terrorism or posing a threat to its neighbors, and ensure that any chemical or biological weapons stockpiles are secured and safely destroyed. The Syrian people will decide the future of Syria. All nations should pledge support and inclusive support to pledge to support and an inclusive and transparent process and refrain from external interference. The United States will recognize and fully support a future Syria government that results from this process. We stand prepared to lend all appropriate support to all of Syria's diverse communities and constituencies. As the president said on Sunday, quote, "It would be a waste of this historic opportunity if one tyrant were toppled only to see a new one rise up in its place. So it is now important, and we're calling upon all the opposition groups who seek a role in governing Syria to demonstrate their commitment to the rights of all Syrians, the rule of law, and the protection of religious and ethnic minorities," unquote. Good statement, yes. But we also have to talk about reality, right? Who was backing the rebels? Turkey. What are the minorities? Kurds, for instance, that are the adversary of Turkey. They don't want to have them. Why? Because Kurds are guiding the Al Qaeda and ISIS prisoners. And not because Turkey loves Al Qaeda or ISIS, but it is also becomes this religious issue here. So from the time that rebels liberated Syria, they have been fighting with Kurds and killing people. So for this reason, those are the minorities that are being mentioned. And of course, other minorities that do exist in Syria as much as in any country, right? So, and the question still remains, who's going to come to power? What will this new leadership be, right? Now, U.S. now considers lifting terror designation for this main Syrian rebel party, right? HTS. We, meaning U.S., has designated them as a terrorist organization in 2012. And so it was reported that U.S. national security officials are debating whether the main Syrian rebel group, which played a leading role in overthrowing Bashar al-Assad's regime, has shifted away from this terrorist activities. But you know how they say, once a cheater, always a cheater. Is that applying to terrorists? What is the material, right, that organization sort of was built off? Because they say that they're denouncing themselves from, let's say, Al-Qaeda and ISIS. But then if you dive into it, their leadership is very much affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Then they say that they do support Christians. But then they have attacked Christian parts of the cities that they took over, right? They were looking where the Christmas trees are and were sort of coming in and hurting people. So for this reason, what they say and what they do remains to be seen, which leads to the point where today John Kirby in the Gaggle said that although HTS leadership says all the right things right now, it remains to be seen what they will actually do. Hence, it is too early to talk about de-designating anyone. So whatever was reported before, the latest is U.S. is thinking, at least this administration is thinking. So whenever something is reported as to U.S. administration, U.S. leadership is considering this or that, at this point until January 19th or January 20th, we have to ask who is meant here. Because one thing is Trump, another thing is Biden, and mostly they don't agree. So before we spread the news, check, who said that. Now, UN today did highlight Syrian refugees' right to voluntary return amid escalating humanitarian crisis. So Damascus, for instance, has been bombed by Israel, but still people are returning to Damascus. If you've ever seen the video where was traffic on Thanksgiving in LA, right? This viral video is where everything is stuck and you just see red and white lights, right, with the cars. That's exactly what's happening in Syria now. So hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees are coming back home. The problem is that the activity, the military activity has not stopped yet. Israel did a good deed. They did target the military targets of ISIS and Al Qaeda. They also destroyed the chemical weapons facility from Assad. Where he developed the chemical weapons that he used to target and kill his own citizens with, right? So, but again, it does happen all across the country. So, returning home is dangerous. So, UN Refugee Agency emphasized that Syrian refugees must have the right to make informed, voluntary, and safe decisions about returning home without external pressure. As the country's 13-year war persists, nearly half of Syria's pre-war population has been displaced, with over 7 million internally displaced and 5 million seeking refuge abroad. Recent military offensives led by this HTS rebels have displaced over 1 million people across Idlib, Aleppo, Hama, and Homs. Those are the cities, with some returning home as humanitarian aid operations resume. However, health facilities remain overwhelmed, and the humanitarian response faces a funding shortfall, with only 1/3 of the $4.1 billion needed for 2024 secured, right? They have, again, only 1/3 of what they need to take care of citizens. Now, UN officials are urging international support to prioritize civilian protection, maintain access for humanitarian aid, and ensure respect for international law while addressing critical challenges in healthcare, nutrition, and basic services in affected areas. Now, when it comes to Kurdish forces now oversee Al-Qaeda prisoners, as I mentioned, and Syria's port, once a key staging area for Russia to supply weapons to Hezbollah and Assad, now lies in ruins, again, since Israel did bomb them. They said that, yes, they and I announced it, right, officially, that Israel has targeted the Syria military facilities. But it's all sponsored by Russia, right? Most of it. It's either Iran or Russia. So Russia did sponsor, for instance, the Navy. Siri is on. Why? Did sponsor the military base or the Navy base that they, Taurus, right? That they have to leave because they were cut off of it. So take a look how this looks right now after it has been targeted. Just mind you, this is the Russian base in Syria.
استهدف طيران الاحتلال الصهيوني المنطقة على منتصف الليل وفجر اليوم بعدة صواريخ. أدى هذا الاستهداف إلى انفجار مستودعات وبواخر وبوارج كانت تتبع لقوات النظام، وذلك بعد أن سيطرت قوات المعارضة على هذه المنطقة. هذه النيران مشتعلة، هنا أحدى البوارج مدمرة والسفن الحربية، بالإضافة أيضا هنا بوارج وسفن حربية دمرت نتيجة الاستهداف من قبل الطيران الاحتلال الإسرائيلي.
Nothing left, so to speak. Now, Steve Rosenberg, whose reports I featured at least twice here. He works for BBC. I love his reports. He reports from Russia. Now, what do you think Russia is saying about the situation in Syria? So one Russian paper today said on Syria, the whole system of Russia's Middle East presence has in the blink of an eye turned into bygone political era. This is a lamentable, agonizing fact that can't be denied or understated, but no reason for an emotional outburst. So no panic on Titanic. So take a look at this report by Steve Rosenberg.
The fall of Assad continues to concern the Russian papers. Today's Moskovsky Komsomolets argues that while events in Syria are very bad for Russia, Moscow should look to the future, not the past. Russia cannot afford to engage in its national sport of hand-wringing and wearing sackcloth and ashes. The whole system of Russia's presence in the Middle East, constructed over the last 10 years and into which very considerable resources had been invested, has in the blink of an eye turned into a bygone political age. This is a lamentable, upsetting, agonising fact that cannot be denied or understated. But it is no reason for a lengthy emotional outburst. Russia simply doesn't have time for that. Why not? Well, this brings us on to one of the main arguments the Russian media are pushing right now after the fall of Assad to minimise the embarrassment for Moscow, that Russia needs to concentrate on the war in Ukraine. Entering the decisive stage now is a crisis that is far and away more important for our country than the situation in the Middle East, the conflict in Ukraine. And then the other argument we're seeing a lot this week, that what happened is Assad's fault, not Moscow's. Russia, not out of political altruism of course, but in its own interests, had given Assad's regime a second life. But instead of learning the lessons the first time his power imploded, Syria's former leader appears to have decided that such gifts would go on forever. The last few days showed that Assad's regime had turned into an empty shell. But then, the writer argues that despite everything, Russia is still thinking big. Modern Russia is a power that retains global ambitions. The Ukrainian conflict, which distracted Moscow from Syria, shows Russia's serious intentions as a great power and global player. A controversial line that. Russia's so-called special military operation in Ukraine did not go at all according to plan, turning instead into a bloody 3-year war. After the fall of Assad, Moscow has lost a considerable, very considerable number of political trump cards, but other countries still need it, want contacts with it. Turkey, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran and all the other key powers in and outside the region still need us, though perhaps not as much as they did 2 weeks ago. How will Russia use this being in demand? Only time will tell. You can see here quite clearly that Russia has this burning desire to be recognised as a global power, a global player, and yet Ukraine hasn't gone to plan for the Russians, and neither has Syria. Kommersant makes the point that for Russia the most urgent question in Syria is preserving its military bases in Tartus and Khmeimim. There have been voices in Russia's parliament who've said that Moscow will retain its military presence in the country. However, in the Kremlin there is no such certainty. This Middle East expert writes that despite signals from Damascus about not wishing to harm relations with the Kremlin, there is little cause for optimism. The people who've come to power in Syria are unlikely to forget the Russian airstrikes, and Moscow is unlikely to want to buy friendship in exchange for generous assistance to rebuild the country.
And so, they will buy it if there will be something to buy. And so HTSs ain't stupid. They wanted to use those military bases to sell them back to Russia. You want access? Sponsor us. You don't want access? Reportedly, they are contacting China. Maybe China wants access. Maybe Iran wants access. Who wants access? Sponsor us. We're going to give you access. And so Russia is caught in this, between the rock and the ugly place here. Now, the dramatic collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria has left Russia facing a significant dilemma regarding its highly strategic military bases in the country. He talked about the Khmeimim air base and Tartus naval base, right? So now, for nearly a decade, Russia has invested heavily in these installations, using them as key logistical hubs for its operations in the Middle East and beyond. That's my point here. It's not just about Syria. It's about access to Middle East and beyond, right? So Tartus, in particular, that shithole that you just saw in the video, is Russia's only warm water port in the Mediterranean, providing crucial access to naval operations across Europe and the Middle East. Similarly, the Khmeimim, this airbase, has served as a base for Russian air power, enabling the Kremlin to exert military influence across Syria and surrounding regions. However, all rebel forces, including the Command of Military Operations Coalition led by this HTS, continue to make gains. The fate of these installations has become increasingly uncertain. Now, over the weekend, opposition forces captured critical areas in Latakia and Tartus provinces where Russia's military assets are based. This included the cities of Tartus and Jableh, both near the Russian-run Khmeimim airbase. Satellite imagery and eyewitness reports suggest that Russian forces have already begun evacuating some of their personnel and military assets from these locations. MiG-31 fighter jets stationed at this airbase have reportedly been redeployed, while Russian naval vessels have moved away from the Tartus port, presumably to avoid becoming vulnerable targets in the midst of Syria's deteriorating security situation. Now, despite the signs of withdrawal, it remains unclear whether Russia plans to abandon these critical bases entirely. According to reports, Russian government is exploring diplomatic solutions with various regional players, including rebel factions, in hopes of retaining access to its military footholds. Now, mind you, Russia did assign HTS as a terrorist organization in 2020, right? So Assad, who with Moscow's military backing had held onto power for years despite a devastating civil war and international condemnation, certainly has fallen. Now, in the face of rapidly changing political landscape, there are growing indications that Russia may be reconsidering its stance on previously designated terrorist groups. So again, they're considering to lift it so they can start trading pretty much with the HTS. Now, HTS leader Jolani delivered a speech where he emphasized the group's desire to build a new political order in Syria, distancing itself from Iran's regional influence and presenting itself as a more viable partner for Russia, China, and other powers. Other powers here is Qatar. Qatar has spoken out to sponsor HTS and to take over those military bases, because why not, right? This marks a sharp contrast to militant rhetoric of the past, suggesting that HTS may be willing to negotiate with Russia to secure a seat at the table in Syria's post-Assad future. Again, the deep dive is in your tonight's email. I got all the types of sources and put it all in one article, which is sort of explains you what, from Russia's perspective, what they're doing, and also from Syria's perspective, how this will be continuing and how it might also affect us. Now, the fan of Assad, Tulsi Gabbard, well, she can't visit him now in Moscow and visit Putin, kill the two birds with one trip. But she never voiced her opinion on what the hell happened in Syria until now. Take a look.
I want to address the issue that's in the headlines right now. I stand in full support and wholeheartedly agree with the statements that President Trump has made over these last few days with regards to the developments in Syria. My own views and experiences have been shaped by my multiple deployments and seeing firsthand the cost of war and the threat of Islamist terrorism. It's one of the many reasons why I appreciate President Trump's leadership and his election, where he is fully committed, as he has said over and over, to bringing about an end to wars, demonstrating peace through strength, and putting the national security interests and the safety, security, and freedom of the American people first and foremost.
Really, not a fan of Al-Qaeda, huh? Not a fan of Al-Qaeda, not a fan of anything Russia sponsors? Interesting. Take it at price value. Now, Russia has agreed with North Korea to send MiG-29, those are fighter jets, and Su-27 to Pyongyang, North Korea, in return for that country sending troops to help with Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. So much to Trump's resolution within 24 hours. Now, per Zelensky, the total number of North Korean forces will be 100,000. Russian court sentenced now New Zealand fighter to 14 years in absentia. So he wasn't there. Approximately 700 volunteers from all types of, it's that volunteer International Legion are fighting in Ukraine. And so Russia got their names and is prosecuting them, sentencing them to 14 years in prison for life, all that kind of stuff. They caught a couple and are prosecuting them on national television, saying that it's a world war, that officially these people are fighting on behalf of their country, which is not true. They're there as volunteers. There's people from Australia, New Zealand, UK, United States, who lose their lives and sacrifice their lives for the fight for Ukraine's sovereignty. So that's what they're doing. Now, China investigates NVIDIA over 2020 acquisition amid ongoing tech trade tensions. NVIDIA, remember the CEO that I talked about a couple of days ago, where he saved $8 billion on tax because he used the loopholes in our, tax law. So Chinese regulators have launched an investigation into NVIDIA, the leading supplier of advanced AI chips, focusing on its 2020 acquisition of Israeli networking company Mellanox. The probe, which analysts see as part of the ongoing tech trade dispute between US and China, has caused NVIDIA stock now to drop more than 2%, as China accounts for 12% of the chip maker's global revenue. Now, some experts suggest that China's actions may be part of a broader strategy to gain leverage in the upcoming trade negotiations as Trump takes office. But however, NVIDIA has also faced antitrust scrutiny in US and France, suggesting the investigation may not solely be driven by geopolitical factors. Okay, sticking with a bit of tech. So Google today, it was big news, unveiled quantum chip Willow that solves problems in minutes. But the problem here is cybersecurity. So Google has unveiled Willow, a groundbreaking quantum chip that solves complex problems in less than 5 minutes. Problems that would take the world's fastest supercomputer 10 septillion years to compute. This milestone marks a major leap in quantum computing, addressing a 30-year challenge, reducing the error rate in systems as more qubits, the quantum bits, are added. Unlike traditional binary bits used in regular computers, quantum computers use qubits that exist in multiple states simultaneously, dramatically speeding up problem solving. So for the first time, Google's Willow demonstrated that adding more those qubits can improve the system's accuracy, a critical step towards scaling quantum computing. This breakthrough could revolutionize fields such as drug trials, AI development, and nuclear reactor construction. However, the advent of the powerful quantum computers also raises cybersecurity concerns, as they could potentially crack even the most secure encryption systems. So currently, Apple has begun working on quantum proofing their iMessage encryption, for instance. And although Willow is still experimental, experts predict that quantum computing could start to significantly impact our lives within the next 5 years. My question is, what do we know is going to happen in the next 5 years with this shit show that we're facing on a daily basis? Sorry. Qubits, I don't know how to pronounce it. Skyman Follies, you're here. Yay, hello. Okay, so what else do I have for you? Let me check. A lot of stuff is in your email, which is the morning AM actual news. And now if you missed this morning, please check it out, because I'm not repeating anything that I say in the morning. Now, also, I talked about it in the morning, but now I want to repeat it, though. There is a discussion between Pentagon leaders, generals who base their careers on learning the tactics and strategies and focusing on how to win wars, and the newly discovered enterprises or startups sponsored by Peter Thiel, startups sponsored by Musk's friends. And so the DOGE Department of what? Governmental Efficiency, wants to suggest to Pentagon to get rid of human-operated machinery. Musk is tweeting openly that he hates the F-35s. They don't want to produce B-21, the bombers. They want to replace everything with drones. So let's have planes that are drones. Let's have everything drones. Tanks, drones. Everything should be a drone. A ship, everything has to be a drone. To which Pentagon leaders are saying that it is, first of all, not realistic enough, because, Tesla is still bumping into parked cars, given their focus on the self-driving cars. Now imagine air battle, imagine the sea battle. Like, how's that going to look like? Also, AI cannot produce a tactic or a strategy, right? It has a goal and it does, execute that goal. The other problem is cybersecurity. What if this is hacked and turned against ourselves? But again, they're selling it, they meaning Ramaswamy, or whatever his name, Ramaswamy, and Musk, as savings, right? We want to save, we want to be efficient, let's get rid of people. And so at this Reagan National Defense Forum a couple of days ago, the buzzword was efficiency, as defense tech startups, including Palantir, this is the co-founder of it is Peter Thiel, and thank you for those who provided this information. And Anduril voiced optimism about gaining a competitive edge through the Trump administration's push to streamline Pentagon's bureaucracy. Joe Landslide, the co-founder of Palantir and venture capitalist and partner of Peter Thiel, business partner, described the potential for revolution in defense contracting, where the bureaucracy is held accountable and forced to do some of these things. Palantir CEO Alex Karp echoed the sentiment, calling Musk the ideal leader for such transformation. Quote, "I don't know how you do better than Elon looking at these things," Karp said, praising Musk companies as models of efficiency. Well, that's new. Despite the enthusiasm from startups, lawmakers at the forum expressed caution. While there was bipartisan agreement on the need for governmental reform, many warned that any substantive changes would need congressional approval. So, for instance, Senator Mark Kelly, who flew into space, who kind of knows what Musk is producing, right, from the inside, Democrat from Arizona, he emphasized that Musk doesn't control the Pentagon's budget and the scope of DOGE's potential remains unclear. Quote, "I don't think we know what this thing is. It's not a government agency. Congress decides how we appropriate and spend money," Kelly told Defense One, which is a great viral newspaper, sort of virtual newspaper or whatever, online newspaper. Some Republican lawmakers, including Representative Don Bacon, Republican from Nebraska, voiced concerns that efforts to cut Pentagon inefficiencies could lead to reductions in vital defense programs. Quote, "I don't want this to be an excuse to cut the force," unquote. So he stressed the need to maintain combat capability, especially in the face of rising threats from China. He cautioned against cutting critical weapon systems such as fighters, ICBMs, and bombers. That's what I'm telling you. Now, Representative Rob Whitman, a Republican, right, agreed that Congress, Republican from Virginia, agreed that Congress must carefully consider which programs to fund in light of efficiency push. Quote, "How do you optimize the use of your resources? How do you make best of those?" Whitman asked, acknowledging the challenge of making strategic decisions. Now, let's pause here. I was in a briefing with Pentagon, and they talked about our bombers, right? The youngest being 30 years old, and the oldest one 70 years old, and how they optimize force. We have only 2,350, I think, pilots who can operate the bombers. And it's very efficient given the age and given the need for it, right? And our promise, not just to us, but to our partners, to defend them. Like, who was conducting the operations in Israel, defending Israel? Who is conducting operations in the Middle East when we talk about 75 targets being successfully eliminated, ISIS targets just 2 days ago? So, insanity. Senator Deb Fischer, again Republican from Nebraska, a leading member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, urged those in the defense industry to propose which programs could be cut. However, she cautioned that any cuts must be approached very carefully, reiterating that Congress must lead the process. And so she came up with this brilliant idea. She says, quote, "Each and every one of you needs to propose a program that you personally benefit from, that you'd be willing to cut," unquote. That's what she said. Now, despite the caution, some lawmakers, such as Representative Adam Smith, Democrat from Washington, recognized that Musk could help the government become more cost effective. However, Smith pointed out that simply improving efficiency wouldn't solve the nation's fiscal crisis. He argued that while Doge could save billions, addressing the US deficit would require much deeper cuts to mandatory spending programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Quote, no matter how efficient the government becomes, Musk is not going to save $2 trillion, unquote, Smith said. And so discussions on defense efficiency continue. The role of startups like Palantir and the broader influence of Musk's vision remain uncertain. Uncertain, but also very effective, right? And we have the dodo birds falling for an okie doke, a smile, and a charisma. Same as, look at this guy who shot the father of children and a CEO of a company. Okay, you don't want to agree with company, fine. You don't want to agree with the health industry, fine. But you shot him in the back, and now somehow this guy's a hero. He's pretty, he's a hero. Let's raise money to get him out. He has a six-pack. Oh my God, he didn't do anything wrong. I have never heard so much about somebody as I've heard about this shooter, the United Healthcare shooter, as much as I've heard about him in the past day. Why do I need to know his sexual history and that he had a trouble, sleeping with women because his back hurt? Why do I know it? Why are we covering them? Why do we cover this shooter more than United, whatever, Healthcare covers, people, healthcare wise? Like, why is it everywhere? Everything I open is about that damn shooter. We have so much to do, and this guy shot somebody, killed somebody. Why are we praising them? Why is he a hero? Not getting it. So, yeah. Now, in terms of Trump, he tweeted a bunch of crazy stuff today. Like, for instance, I can read it out. It's so crazy you have to read it out. You can't summarize it. At least my brain doesn't think like it, so I can't. Quote, Trump says, any person or company investing $1 billion or more in the United States of America will receive fully expedited approvals and permits, including, but in no way limited to, all environmental approvals. Get ready to rock! 3 exclamation points. Whoever voted for somebody to run the United States as a business, here you go. Congratulations, I guess. Now, he also tweeted, America is going to start building monuments to our great heroes again. And I think he means himself. I think the first monument will be him, for him. Okay, that's it on the news. Let me see the comments. Okay. Hey, Maurice. Hello. Yay, they're trying to get their feet in the door. They don't care about improving. They want the money. Obviously, right. They want to just take United States government apart and monetize every single part of it. It's the same story like, when you see like everything for sale. We have a new owner of the store. So he doesn't like everything. Everything is for sale. So I can put my own shelves with my own products. That's the story. Correct. Remember when Musk announced the bulletproof Cybertruck that is not even bulletproof? Yeah, I mean, this guy is overpromises and underdelivers, and it's not him underdelivering. It's his employees, because he pushes them to achieve unimaginable, right? So it's good for raising money, and this is what we have to give to him. Like, he's great in raising money and brainwashing people, which reminds you on whom? Trump. Okay. All right. So who else do we have? Did you cover the meeting regarding SSI and Medicare? No, I haven't. The biggest thing there was, everybody was just complaining, by the way, this morning. And Bonnie, thank you so much for reminding me. Hey, Bonnie, thank you for being here. Everybody was complaining, stating that it is I mean, just every single person complaining why this thought even is dangerous to entertain, to cut the budget for Medicare, Medicaid. And somebody brought up this example where she stated that, we talk about elderly, we talk about people with pre-existing conditions losing coverage and suffering. And she said, look, for instance, we have people who have AIDS, and where AIDS is not detectable. And Bonnie, probably you can correct me on this, because they do take pills daily. And so they don't pass the disease to their children and whatnot. And she said, if they stop taking this medication, which they take based on their coverage, they will, or AIDS will return somehow. Bonnie, probably you know better. But anyway, AIDS will become detectable within 5 weeks. So she said, in a matter of few months, we're going to have millions of people dying, for everybody for their own reason, whether it is AIDS returning, whether it is heart conditions, any pre-existing condition, not being able to afford your medication for diabetes, or blood pressure, or cancer treatment, any of it. So they say, well, if we want to see mass just death within the United States, mass deportations, and this is the reality we're walking into. And so all what they discussed is that, yes, there are rules that prohibit, for instance, Trump just to roll over and put executive orders and defund this and that. But again, ultimately, what I can summarize it into, everything will be ending up at the Supreme Court, whether it is Medicare, Medicaid questions, whether it is Pentagon questions. And then the problem is, who will Supreme Court decide with? And I leave it at that. Bonnie says, yes, there are mats that keep colony count indetectable. Exactly. Yeah. Makes everyone safer and less sick overall. Exactly. Yeah. And this is pretty evil to even, talk about it. Correction, T cells undetectable. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I'll dive more into it, but unless, it's 2 hours of emotions and sort of like, what some insurance, CEOs of several insurances said that certainly the killing of the United Healthcare guys, CEOs, did wake them up to address the notion. What really surprised them, he said, is not the killing itself, but the the people's reaction to it. That people are so resonating with hating upon the healthcare system that is making so many profits, that people are even overstepping the internal morals, right, as to seeing this guy as a killer. Now, I would add that he's pretty and educated and well-spoken. That adds to it, right, with a significant online presence. But, like people I see asking, be my baby daddy and all this kind of nonsense. So, but again, that sort of woke them up, and maybe this is something that will prompt them to do anything. But again, if we remove Medicare, Medicaid from the marketplace, where United States government is pretty much the biggest buyer, hence can negotiate pricing, it will be free fall, right? Where it will be wild west when it comes to pricing for medication, and they will know we need it. So, for this reason. Lisa says, you shouldn't live your life in a way that makes us root for your assassin. Exactly. And that's to that point. So I was kind of plus minus happy to see their reaction on that part. Rosie Marie, yes, you're right, Lisa. They underestimated the outrage towards commercial healthcare plans. Yeah. Hey, Jay. Hello. Musk has a major interest in eugenics. Just saying. Yeah. People who qualify for Medicare can't afford commercial plans. Indeed. And, this will, again, if all of this happens, and to refer to that session this morning, if all of this happens, this will be just a very different and very sad situation in the United States, where they do agree that if this is done within 4 years, how fast will this be undone? And probably will take decades to do so, because again, you will be pretty much reinventing the wheel, hoping to have enough senators and representatives to vote in favor and all that kind of stuff. So, very, very sad and warning, that type of atmosphere. So catastrophic. Exactly. That's a good word, Bonnie. Yeah, catastrophic. And they just explained pretty much for the first hour what will be the reasons for people dying. And I'm like, okay, let's write an article about it. Yippee. No, I mean, you kind of know it. Okay, I'm going to leave you with this. So, I felt so upset today because there's just so much, like, all this negative stuff. And I want you to thank yourself for doing well. If you are here, you're listening to this, you keep your head on a swivel. Yeah, you might not be feeling your best or even content or even, cool, calm, and collected always, but you're trying and you're doing well, right? Which is really thank yourself for it. Which brings me to a video by Snoop Dogg, who thanked himself. So on this notion, I want to end. So take over.
Last but not least, I want to thank me. I want to thank me for believing in me. I want to thank me for doing all this hard work. I want to thank me for having no days off. I want to thank me for never quitting. I want to thank me for always being a giver and trying to give more than I receive. I want to thank me for trying to do more right than wrong. I want to thank me for just being me at all times.
So I want to thank you, and I want you to thank yourself for doing well, for understanding what's right, what's wrong, for sticking there, for not, allowing yourself to be shocked into inaction and obedience. And because you're here and you're listening, you certainly are not in obedience. You want to learn, you want to know what's best for you. So kudos to you. Thank you for being here once again. And I'm going to see you tomorrow morning before I head to my meeting in person tomorrow. Amen. Exactly. Amen. I adore Snoop. We should be our own hype people. Exactly. And Sarah, yes. Okay. All right. Hearts and everything. All right, guys. Have a good night. See you tomorrow morning. Thank you so much for being here. Share it with somebody who wants to learn about it. And also check out your newsletter. Okay. There's all the deep dives and everything there. All right. Have a good night. See you tomorrow morning.